straight out the gate, Skeet, man. We back like our last song, no, man. You're talking about here to talk about this Six-Headed-Maat. You understand me? God damn it, me. Listen, this shit crazy, right? And I know a lot of y'all is not finna F with it though, man, cause I ain't gonna lie, man, it's like some Stargate, you understand me, Deep Space Nine, you know, Star Wars shit though. I ain't gonna lie though, like it's just like extraterrestrial. No, but real shit though. In my last video, I was doing a lot of philology work, you know. I was showing who Maat was throughout the indigenous Americas, and more mind-blowing stuff, I showed that she was a six-headed, six-armed, six-legged giant ancestor that ascended into the sky and became the Pleiades. The ladies became the Pleiades. In some cultures it was the brothers, which was real interesting. And I'm going to get into that in other videos. I'm going to have to slow walk those stories, you know, because I'm kind of doing cram daddy type stuff with this information, man. But anyways, the mind-blowing part is that we learned in my last video that our foremost ancestor, that was our version of the Adam and Eve, and I don't even like saying that like that, was this six-headed giant ancestor. But he came from the underworld. That's crazy. Again, that's still like blowing my mind. Like, the first people, the first humans were beings that came from the underworld. They were the first ones to die, therefore they became the rulers of the underworld. I mean, they literally created the path that leads to the plane that all have to travel. In this video, we're going to get a little bit more precise and specific in distinguishing the twins, Yama and Yami. But let's deal with Maat real quick, right? We know who Maat is, right? For those who have studied, right? She's the personification of law, moral order, truth, justice, righteousness, right? And she's the one that administers the affairs of heaven and the judgment of the souls of men and where they go, right? Her name, encoded in her name, Ma'a, Ma'e, is dealing with traveling, water moving, current of a stream, to go, to journey, to go straight to a place, to travel where? This is why the Kemetic people had something known as funerary boats to travel on after world water. And so what people don't know, right? Because a lot of people talk about Maat, right? What people don't know is that what we know in our culture in America as the Grim Reaper, the one who takes the souls, that's actually in the paradigm of Maat. But here's the difference. Yama and Yami, or Maat, right? Maat has a twin that nobody talks about. I've only heard one person talk about it, right? Mentioned it. And nobody else in the Kemetic community talks about who Ma'e is. Yeah. Maat's twin is known as Ma'e. He's the one that administers your judgment, right? That decides where you go using his magical Ankh. Shout out to Uncle Yama. Yeah, but let's show primary evidence of this, right? Since the Kemetic people love talking about Ma'at, let's get into this Ma'e stuff. So we will be six-toe stepping using A.E. Wallace Budge book known as The Gods of the Egyptians. It comes in 2 volumes. This is volume 1, and we will be reading from page 308, right? discussing the history of the creation of the gods and the worlds, version A, infamously known as the Book of Knowing the Evolutions of Ra, Overthrowing Apep. I kind of want to speed read, but then again I don't, but let me just read this for you till we get to my main point. So it says, the Book of Knowing the Evolutions of Ra, Overthrowing Apep. The words of Nebertcher, by the way, that's the supreme God, right? Or epithet of the supreme God, which he spake, right? After he had come into being, I am he who comes into being in the form of Khepri. I became the creator of what came into being, the creator of what came into all being, after my coming into many beings, where the things which came into beings come forth from my mouth. Not existed heaven, not existed earth, not had been created the things of the earth and creeping things in place, that I raised up them from out of Nu, the primeval abyss of water. From a state of inactivity, not found I a place I could stand wherein. I work a charm upon my heart. I laid a foundation in my A. I made attribute every. I was alone, for not I had spit, or not had I spit in the form of Shu. I can pause right there for many reasons. One of the main reasons is because, as we read, I laid a foundation in my A, right? Clearly, when we read the word my A, it doesn't show the glyphs to spell out my A name. It uses Shu. So here is showing that my A and Shu are synonymous, or to be more precise, before Shu was spat out, my I was the pre-Shu, or the precursor of what became Shu. But let's get a little deeper, because we're talking about Gardner H6. For those that's in the Kemetic community, you know where I'm going with this. And Gardner H6, it shows the Shu feather, or what's known as Shu. And what Alan Gardner reminds us is that the word Shu was also synonymous with Ma'at. And he shows the adjectival forms, but the very word, or the feather used for Shu, is used to represent Ma'at. And as we reread it, now here's the nail in the coffin, it states, now this is Nebertcher talking, I worked a charm upon, or with, my heart. I laid a foundation in my A. Think about that for a minute. The creator is basically using her heart, right, in order to continue creation. And in doing that, it laid a foundation in my A. Did you put the two together? You didn't do it yet, did you? Ma'at in the judgment hall scene is shown weighing what? The heart with a shoe feather. Even in dealing with cosmology and creation, the Supreme Lord is associating its heart with my A, speaking truth. Now, mind you, this is where it gets a little funky. This is not an adjectival form. This is showing a deity. Check out the Gardner. Yes, a deity determinative is used to express my A. So my A is an actual deity, or a deity form of Ptah, aka Nebertcher. Hence, my A. See, nobody talks about that. But Alfred Wallace Budge does. In page 296, he goes as far as showing that Ma'a and Shu are the same. And he goes to note that my A was with Khepri. All right, we talking about before the creation of all the netters and the gods. Maat, right, shown as a deity aspect of himself, was there in the beginning, so no error will happen in creation. So therefore, when we mess up in our lives and we create error, Maat deals with us. The masculine aspect of the Supreme Lord that appoints you through the Ankh, with the Ankh, to go to the planes. Now let's talk about Maat. Because if he, Lord Yama, is the Lord of death and judgment, right, that appoints us to our subterranean realms, the planets, right, she must be the lady of life. Yes, Yami is the lady of life. Yama is the Lord of death. Yes, Yami is often made associated with Yamuna. Yes, the river Yamuna that we go today to purify ourselves. Well, there's an actual place in the spirit world where spirits, if, they make it to the other side, can make it to her river of life that gives you vitality to live abundantly and eternally in the spirit plane. And to all the Maatologists out there, don't be so quick to speak so fast on who you think Maat is, because she also has a double in the spirit world. Yep. One in Upper and Lower Egypt, which should teach people what? The real Egypt is in the spirit world. We just reduplicated it down here. Mushroom clouds. So we know Maat has a double. Well, did you know that Maat has a double too? Speaking of that, within the same body of text we're reading from, in another version of it, in page 219, we read about Maat. But in this text, this is showing Maat expressed as Nebertcher's eye, but in a deity form, which is very interesting. Again, the I is synonymous with Maat. The I, on repeat, is synonymous with Maat. The I 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 is synonymous with Maat. Okay, my apologies for that broken record. Back to our regularly scheduled program. The Supreme God, or Nebertcher's eye, is made synonymous with Maat. And if you read further down, it goes into saying what? Vegetation and reptiles came from the god Rem. Look how it shows the eye. Then it goes to further say, from the tears falling from me, cried my eyes, Maat came into being mankind. Again, here, this is basically saying humankind was created from the tears of Ra. But see, people didn't know that this sun and Maat and the I were all expressed synonymous as the deity. Look very close. You see Maat, you see the sun glyph, and you see the I. And what's more important is you see the single stroke line. See that line right there? For those of us that have taken the time to study Egyptology, aka chematology, the single line denotes the actual glyph being shown. See? And so here we see the sun is represented in a literal sense. Yes, literal. Now, if that is true, it would only make sense why when people actually transition, they see the light, the sunlight at the end of the tunnel. So let's further six-toe step into my greater point about Ma'at being the sun. Because again, according to the story, something occurred, right, that made Nebertcher's eye weak or covered, that resulted in Nebertcher crying out of Ma'at deity, right? Look at the Bin stone, right? See the eye, see the sun, great buzzard, right? Leading back into the whole Bin stone and the rays hitting the mound, right? Creation, whole story, right? But again, Ma'at sun, Ma'at sun, Ma'at sun. I gotta say that like a mantra, right? But watch this. When you study the lineage of Ma'at and Yama, who are the same people who I argue, or to be more precise, Ma'e and Yama, right? And Yami and Ma'at, they both have the same lineage. The sun. Yama is the son of Surya. That's the sun. Ma'at is the daughter of Ra. Okay, both Yama, Yami, Ma'e, Ma'at are offsprings of the sun. Fun fact, Surya, the sun, one of its older Vedic epithets is Ravi. Ra-vi. Ra, Egyptian Ra. Now, if we accept by virtue of the evidence presented that Ma'at and the sun are synonymous, right? Then surely the symbol used to represent Ma'at has something to do with the sun too, right? I have a theory. Look at all these definitions of Ankh. Look at Ankh T, the two eyes of Horus or Ra is called Ankh T. And then it says what? I.e. sun and moon. Look at the other definitions. Ankh means star, right? The son of Sothis, right? So there's star associations. The Ankh, which I'm going to go deeper in on a whole nother video, the Ankh is simply nothing more than a pastoral tool, right? Used to hold, grab, control, direct cattle, right? Of course, it can be used to rope enemies and but if Ma'at is the sun, the Ankh has something to do with the sun also, right? Watch what I do here. Matter of fact, you know what? I'm going to say less, bruh. As we said in our scholastic circles, demonstration beats conversation. Here you go. Please explain, right? Make your own decision up. But what is the Ankh doing coming from the sun unless the Ankh is constructed or made out of something that is of the sun? Now notice there was a level of uncertainty that I have there. Because in all honesty, as much as I know what the Ankh is, there still needs to be heavy research and actual primary text of some sort, some type of primary evidence to show what was the storyline on how the Ankh was created, right? Now, I'll get into the other storylines on my other video, but this right here is fascinating to me, right? Studying CMEs, coronal mass ejection, solar flares. I was studying, the photosphere and the surface of the sun, and I saw this looping effect with, which is associated with the sun's magnetic field, right? And then I know Ma'at is the sun, right? offspring of the sun in Nebertcher's story. Maat is expressed as the sun, or Maat. So listen. And it makes sense because, like this one entry right here, what is the Ankh doing associated with Amenta? Amenta is the West. Now, what does that have to do with all of this? Well, it's common knowledge for those that study Egyptology that the dead were buried in the West. Why? Because the West is the natural orientation that souls take upon leaving their tomb. Right? Because they're under the sun's Ankh. See what I did there? Therefore, I can see why this entry can make sense on how the Ankh naturally unks people to the West, and there's a natural direction people take. That's a whole nother bill. But I need people to remember that Ma'at represents the eye of the Supreme Lord, the Supreme Godhead, right? And this eye is called Ma'at, the Seer, right? This is why Ma'at has 18 eyes. Only I will quantify that type of stuff, right? 3 eyes on each head, multiply that by 6. We talking about a spider. Well, greater than a spider. But again, Lord Ma'a, Yama, and Ma'at and Yami are the ones who unk the souls to their proper locations. Now, what does all of this have to do with this Aboriginal stuff? Everything. Because we're talking about Yama and Yami, Ma'e and Ma'at being twins, being the first ones to die. Oops. Wait. You telling me, yep, right here in Cherokee, we have the same twin stories. The stories aren't exactly identical, but the same twin association dealing with the West, dealing with the origins of death. To make a long story short, because I'm probably going to have to make a whole video breaking this down, reading the story, the sun got jealous and planned to kill people because it was extremely hot. The Cherokee people went to see the little men who were medicine men. They end up creating these 2 snakes in order to kill the sun, and one of the snakes end up biting the daughter of the sun. The sun's daughter ended up dying. The sun no longer could torture people, but then they needed the sun to come back out. So then the medicine men did some more spiritual work and tried to retrieve the daughter back from the darkening land to try to get the sun to come back. And yeah, and as a result of this story, this would led to the first death, and it dealt with the sun. And in this story, the sun also cried and mourned. But how do we know that this is like associated with Ma'at? Look at the title of the story, Sirski. The daughter of the sun. Who's the daughter of Ra in Egypt? Ma'at. Same story with the origins of death, except the Cherokee, we tell it a whole nother way that we gotta unlock in a whole nother video. But again, the daughter of the sun dies, right? The daughter of Ra also dies. But in the Kemetic story, it's Ma'e. He was the first. She ended up dying too, Ma'at. But yeah, see, that's crazy. Again, look at the iconography in the Mississippian hero twins, right? Because in this story regarding the daughter of the sun, 4 snakes were created: the spreading adder, the copperhead, the rattlesnake, and Uktana. And when we look at this iconographic representation drawn by the artist Herb Rowe, we see the Mississippian hero twins emerging out of the back of a raccoon face horned serpent. But you know, interestingly, in our Cherokee story, it was the men, right, that were transformed into these magical serpents. But this where I give him a hickey with the blicky, man. You under dig me, Ski? When we count up the number, the association on top of the head, why is there 5 principal points coming to the head, counting the head, right, which totals out to 6, just like the global iconography that we have seen representing the first foremost ancestor that died, Yama Yami.